Introduction to the Rebellion of the Qing Dynasty. In the 12th year of the Kangxi reign, on the eve of the San Francisco Rebellion, a soul from later generations carried the total war system to this chaotic world. Chapter 1. General of Yangwu Town. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. In 1673 AD, it was the 20th day of the first month in the 27th year of the Yongle reign of the Ming Dynasty, the 12th year of the Kangxi reign of the Qing Dynasty. Hua. Watching the faint outline of land shrouded in mist on the distant sea level, Yang Jian slowly exhaled a breath of turbid air from his chest, and the large stone that had been hanging in his heart could finally fall. After several months of drifting at sea and being attacked by the Qing navy, they lost many brothers and finally arrived here. The small treasure island hanging alone in the South China Sea was still known as Hainan Island in Qingzhou at this time. Finally arrived. Yang Jian took a deep breath and sighed. At this moment, a sound of footsteps echoed behind him. Yang Jian knew who the newcomer was without looking back. Sure enough, a moment later, a rough voice sounded from behind. Zhongzhen, the front convenience is Qingzhou. According to the nautical chart, it should be the boundary of Wanzhou. Yang Jian nodded slightly and said, "First, send a small boat to the island to investigate the enemy's situation and be prepared to set up an ambush for the enemy. At the same time, instruct all the brothers on board to prepare for landing." Delying. The man agreed, but was not in a hurry to leave. He hesitated for a moment and then said, "General Town, the garrison strength of the Qing bandits in Qingzhou should not be underestimated. If we only rely on more than 1,000 brothers in Yangwu Town, we may still be unable to recover. Why not inform the Crown Prince and ask them to join forces and conquer Qingzhou together?" Yang Jian turned his head and gave a faint glance at the visitor, saying, "The Crown Prince is far away in Dongning, and the Chen and Feng factions in the court are fiercely contested. Naturally, he is powerless to expedition to Qingzhou. Moreover, since my late father passed away, the Crown Prince has never sent an envoy to inquire about the affairs of Yangwu Town. If we rely on the Crown Prince, we may only be able to drift on this sea forever." Chen Anxin's face darkened. As a general of Yangwu Town, he also understood the current difficulties they were facing. Since Zheng's departure from Dongning during the Civil War, they have been in a state of listening to the tune but not listening to the announcement. They have been drifting at sea all year round and dealing with the Qing army. It has been almost a decade now, and they are almost in dire straits. 2 months ago, they engaged in battle with the puppet Qing Guangdong Navy and suffered a major defeat, while Yang Jian, who had been serving as the commander-in-chief for 2.5 years, was shot by stray bullets during the battle and fell unconscious. Yangwu Town immediately fell into chaos without a leader, debating whether to return to Dongning first. At this moment, Yang Jian, who was claimed by the doctor to be unconscious for at least a few months, suddenly woke up. After waking up, he ordered a surprise attack on Qingzhou Island, using Qingzhou as his future base. It was precisely after that time that the senior officials in the military vaguely noticed that there were some differences in the personality and style of conduct of the chief officer compared to before. The reason for all of this is only clear to Yang Jian himself. The current Yang Jian is not a person from this world. To be precise, his soul comes from the 21st century, more than 300 years later. Yang Jian doesn't remember how he traveled through it, and this matter is not important. At the beginning of his arrival, Yang Jian was very confused about his current situation. However, upon learning of his new identity and era, he quickly decided on his future goals. He only had to do 3 things before the San Francisco Rebellion: anti-Qing, anti-Qing, and anti-Qing. The old tune doesn't need to be repeated, but since his current identity is as the commander-in-chief of Yangwu Town under the reign of King Yanping of the Ming Dynasty, and his soldiers have a deep blood feud with the Qing court, Yang Jian is destined to go all the way to the dark and persist in his anti-Qing restoration of the Ming Dynasty through the tide of the San Francisco Rebellion a year later. Well, Anti-Qing is certain, it depends on the situation. However, ideals are full, reality is bone-like. Yang Jian may have been pinned to death before he even started with his over 1,000 elderly, weak, sick, and disabled subordinates. Fortunately, he also traveled with a system based on the game Empire Total War he had played before his journey. The game background of Emperor's War spans the entire 18th century, which is more than 30 years later. This is the world dominated by flint-fired smoothbore guns and artillery, used to fight against the Qing Dynasty, where cold and hot weapons alternate. That's not a sudden decrease in difficulty. As long as someone has money and food, this system can train an elite army for them. However, before that, they still need to obtain a stable base, so Yang Jian will resist public opinion and refuse to continue serving as a thug for the Jing family in Dongning, turning to the isolated Cheongzhou Island to establish his own home. Cheongzhou is a land of mixed Han and Yi ethnic groups, located at the southernmost tip of the mainland. It has always been one of the most difficult areas for the central court to control. However, this area is rich in various resources, as well as the largest iron ore in Asia. Moreover, farmland can be planted year-round, making it a treasure trove of feng shui. With proper management, it can become a pearl in the South China Sea. How could Yang Jian let go of such a feng shui treasure land? Quickly, as the fleet moved closer to the shore, Yi's small boat was lowered and the soldiers on board rowed vigorously, maneuvering the boat towards the shore. While waiting for the small boat to return and report, Yang Jian also began to wear armor. As he was in the warm south, he and his soldiers mainly wore sleeveless cloth face armor or rattan armor. Some soldiers did not even wear armor and only wore single clothes. After waiting for about half an hour, the small boat sent out finally returned and reported the situation on the shore to Yang Jian. In the main town, there is no one above the shore. There is a village, but it has been abandoned for many years, with only one piece of ruins and no Qing army ambushes inside. Looking for a book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com, but from the footprints, it appears that someone has visited it within at least 10 days. The scout reported with his fists clasped together. After speaking, he added, "There is a stone tablet at the entrance of the village with the words Dongyeo Village engraved on it, indicating that this place should be Dongyeo Village under the jurisdiction of Wanzhou County. It seems that the Qing Dynasty thieves will often patrol this place." Yang Jian nodded. It's only normal to have abandoned villages. If there were people living and working by the sea, that would be the real thing. Now, the Qing court has strict maritime restrictions, and no one is allowed to go to the sea. They have also relocated several miles, causing unbearable suffering for the sea people. They are also unable to land and obtain supplies from the people. Since that's the case, let's go ashore, Yang Jian said. Let's first rest here and send a scout team to investigate the situation in the inland. It's best to find out the situation of the garrison in Wanzhou County. With Yang Jian's command, General Chen Anxin personally led hundreds of soldiers on boats with lower waterlines to sail towards the shore, landing first and taking precautions to prevent attacks on large forces when they landed. Perhaps because it was a foggy day today, the Qing army's patrol troops did not notice the Ming army landing on the shore. It took them half a day to send everyone ashore, leaving only a few people to watch the boat. There were over 1,500 soldiers in Yangwu town who followed Yang Jian, as well as the families of the soldiers who were brought out by Yang Jian's father. The total number of them was over 3,200. Originally, their numbers would have been higher, but after a series of battles and poor living conditions at sea, only these people were left. Although the number of people is not large, they are all loyal to the Yang family father and son. The operation situation of Yangwu town is actually not much different from that of warlords. Since the death of the national surname Yi, they have been in a state of listening to the tune and not listening to the announcement with the Dongning court. They only occasionally cooperate with Dongning to attack the Qing army, and the army only knows the Yang family father and son, not the Yanping crown prince. Chapter 2. Leading the enemy out of the city. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After the landing of the army, Yang Jian immediately dispatched Chen Anxin to personally lead a scout team deep into the inland to see if they could catch a tongue and come back. At the same time, General Zhong and above generals were also gathered in front of him. There is one deputy general and 2 participating generals in Yangwu town. Among them, the deputy general leads the Yangwu town central military camp, and the 2 participating generals each lead the left and right camps, with more than 500 people in each camp. Yang Jian's father favored Western firearms, so all members of the central military camp were equipped with heavy matchline guns purchased from the Portuguese. Vice General Yang Yanqin is Yang Jian's uncle and also the trusted second in command by his father. Yang Yanqin is skilled in wielding a nearly 6-pound large sword, with excellent martial arts skills and a steady demeanor. He has a record of wielding 3 Manchurian white armored soldiers. General Lin Renjin and Chen Anxin were both brothers who had followed Yang Jian's father for many years. The former had a pirate background and was appointed as a general after surrendering to Yangwu town. Yang Yanqin and Lin Renjin came together to the front of the general officer, and Yang Jian didn't say much nonsense. He directly opened the door and saw the mountain path. This place is located in Wanzhou, and to the north is Wanzhou County. With a large number of soldiers, I cannot avoid the eyes and ears of the Qing thieves. Therefore, I plan to actively lure the Qing army from Wanzhou out of the city to besiege and annihilate them in the field battle, and seize Wanzhou County. But we still don't know the number of Qing soldiers in Wanzhou, Lin Renjin said, touching his chin beard. Qiongzhou is located in a remote area, and the Qing bandits do not know how to deploy heavy troops. Moreover, it is only a small county town, and the maximum military strength will not exceed 1,000. If we attack the county town forcefully, we will have no choice but to do so. But if we are in the field, what are the fears of our soldiers? Yang Jian said confidently. Indeed, that's true. Lin Renjin nodded and raised his own doubts. But how should we make the Qing army in Wanzhou take the initiative to launch an attack? After all, if they find that their troops are far inferior to ours, they may not dare to take the risk of launching an attack easily. Yang Jian smiled slightly, but his gaze turned to Lin Renjin and said, then we need Lin Kanjiang to start his old business again. Lin Renjin's face was puzzled, and Yang Yanqin beside him immediately understood his meaning. He smiled and said, I think the main town wants you to lead the brothers of the right camp to pretend to be pirates and lure the Qing army from Wanzhou to come and besiege. After hearing this, Lin Renjin suddenly realized. Yang Jian also smiled and nodded, saying, indeed, if only a small group of pirates were to invade the border, the Qing army in Wanzhou would not seek reinforcements from other places, but would personally come to suppress them. In this way, we fell for our trap. So we'll start taking action tomorrow. Lin Renjin asked eagerly. Yang Jian nodded and agreed. After inquiring about the situation of the soldiers in the army, he instructed the 2 to return to their respective camps and prepare the army for battle. Until evening, Chen Anxin, who had been sent out, finally returned with a team of people. They directly raided a pier in Dongyao village heading inland and grabbed back 3 tongues. Perhaps due to the foggy weather and the fact that Qiongzhou has never been within the scope of southern Ming forces, the Qing army there finally reacted until they were attacked, but it was already too late. The 3 tongues they caught were not that tough, they only scared them a little, and before even using their tools, they took the initiative to reveal everything they knew. According to their instructions, there were indeed not many troops stationed in Wanzhou County from Dongyao to the north. The stationed army was called Wanzhou Camp, with a force of about 1,000, including 100 cavalry and about 500 sailors, led by guerrilla Li Yulin. Li Yulin is a Hanli mixed-race person who is skilled in wielding a long stick weighing nearly 10 pounds. He is exceptionally brave, but his actions are impatient and he is good at wealth. He is called Li Shatu by nearby Li people. Upon hearing that the strength of the 10,000 battalions was only 1,000, most of them were sailors who were not good at land warfare. The soldiers in the army naturally became more confident and prepared for tomorrow's attack. The next day, according to the plan, General Lin Rinjin led only over 200 soldiers to launch an attack and headed north. As they did not deliberately conceal their whereabouts, and the fog that successfully concealed their tracks yesterday had dissipated, they were soon discovered by the Qing army along the border. Immediately, a fast horse rushed out of Duntai and headed towards Wanzhou County, reporting the enemy situation to the guerrillas in Wanzhou. Because the troops led by Lin Rinjin put away the flag of the Ming army in anything that could indicate their identity, dressed as pirates, Li Yulin, a guerrilla in Wanzhou who was still taking a nap that afternoon, received enemy information about pirates landing on the island in Dongouduan. See pirates. Damn it, just after the spring festival, those damn things are here. Li Yulin, who was awakened from his sleep, cursed, and asked the servant to change his clothes while sending for the supervisor of the county of Wanzhou to discuss the matter. At this time, it was still in the early Qing Dynasty, and the culture of Wengui Wujian had not yet been completely finalized. Moreover, the guerrillas were subordinate to the 3rd grade, and the supervisor of the county was only the 7th grade, so the latter naturally did not dare to ask for a big snub. Therefore, with only a short stroke of incense, Wan Lin, the supervisor of the county, hurried over. He saluted Li Yulin after entering the house, and then opened the door and said, "Li Guerrilla, I heard that there are sea bandits invading the border, and I don't know how many bandits are there." "At most, it's only 300, Li Yulin said. "It's just a group of pirates. If the guerrilla intends to point troops to suppress them, there's no need to report to the main town. You can find the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com to mobilize the masses. With 10,000 troops and horses, it's enough to deal with it." Upon hearing Li Yulin's words, Wan Lin's eyes wandered around, which was also in line with his intention. If troops were to be transferred from Cheongzhou Prefecture, he would have to bear the cost of sending troops. Wanzhou is not a wealthy county, so there is no need to go into a big fight over these petty thieves. With this in mind, Wan Lin's face showed a smile and he said, "Since Li Guerrilla has already made a decision, then I will order someone to prepare the necessary food and pay for sending troops." "Thank you." Li Yulin arched his hand and said. Wan Lin's actions were quick, and he prepared the necessary food and supplies for Wan Ying's expedition that night. However, Li Yulin was not prepared to launch an overnight attack. He first ordered the sailors to board a ship and search for ships left by the pirates along the coast to destroy them, cutting off their retreat. He himself waited for early tomorrow morning to send troops to clear them. While the thousands of Qing soldiers were preparing to go on an expedition, Yang Jian was not idle either. In order to prevent the Qing army from detecting their main force, Yang Jian took advantage of Lin Rinjin's attention to attract the Qing army in Wanzhou. He dispatched several small teams to attack the border piers and terraces belonging to Weining, and ordered Chen Anxin to stay at the base, commanding ships to strengthen their defense on the sea and be vigilant against the threat of Qing navy. Dun Tai is like a beacon tower, at most it can only provide early warning on how to resist the attack of the Ming army. Therefore, in just one night, the Ming army destroyed several Dun Tai in succession. On the morning of January 23, Li Yulin, a guerrilla from Wanzhou, finally counted his troops and headed south from the city, under the leadership of a scout, towards the rampant pirates south of the county town. Because there were only 300 pirates in this group, Li Yulin did not take them to heart. He only carried 500 cavalry infantry and guards, except for one of his guards who led hundreds of sailors to stay behind, almost pouring out. Chapter 3. Setting Ambush. You are listening at novelfull.audio. While Li Yulin led his army to leave Wanzhou, Yang Jian personally led his army to follow Lin Rinjin far behind, heading north towards the established ambush circle. As mentioned earlier, the Qing army's piers and abutments have always served as beacon towers, and it is impossible for the station troops inside to defend and resist. Therefore, wherever Lin Renjin and his pirates went, almost all of the Qing army's piers and abutments along the border were deserted, leaving only a solitary pier. This actually gave the Ming army the opportunity to hide their whereabouts. Since the Qing army had all fled, it was impossible for anyone to expose them. Moreover, they only operate within a range of 30 miles from the coast to the inland, and the people in this area have long been forcibly relocated, with no one else except for the Ming army. The ambush circle set up by Yang Zhiyan is located in a place called Yingzhepo, which is on the south bank of the Wanning River that must be crossed from Wanzhou to Dongyao. Before the ban on sea, it was a relatively prosperous ferry. However, after the ban on sea was issued, there were no other people except for the Qing army who patrolled here from time to time. Before them, Lin Renjin had already led his subordinates to cross the Wanning River on a floating bridge, and they marched north with great prowess, as if entering an uninhabited territory. Soon, they encountered the Wanzhou Green Camp. Li Yulin looked down on these less than 300 soldiers and ordered his subordinates to guard as vanguards, leading troops to pursue them. The two armies engaged in a fierce battle, and the pirates were on the verge of collapse and fled in panic. When the news returned to Li Yulin, the guerrilla from Wanzhou couldn't help but burst out laughing. He said, "Such weak pirates dare to act recklessly in front of this guerrilla. If the order is issued, all the pirates captured will be beheaded, and no mercy will be spared." The Wanzhou Green Camp chased after them all the way and quickly arrived at the bank of the Wanning River. Perhaps due to their disdain for the pirates, they did not notice that they were able to maintain calm and organization while retreating. After pursuing the Wanning River, Lin Renjin led his team to escape along the pontoon bridge. As a legitimate pirate, he was an expert in escape. Under his leadership, the Ming army only lost a small number of soldiers and successfully escaped the Wanning River, provoking various pursuers on the south bank. Although the pursuing Qing army garrison was angry, his caution led him to choose to temporarily hold his ground and wait on the shore to join the main force. The pirates on the opposite side saw this and knew they couldn't go too far, so they continued to run away. The Qing garrison thought that their prudence could win the praise of the Shangguan, but they didn't expect that after Li Yulin led his army to arrive, they saw him still standing on the shore and not chasing after him. They immediately gave him a big mouth and cursed. "Damn it, what are you waiting for here? A few cats and dogs will scare you off." The defender who was beaten felt wronged. He covered the area where he was beaten and said wrongly, "I am also worried about fraud. Although the pirates have weak combat power, they still maintain a few rules and regulations when retreating. I am also being cautious." Li Yulin sneered at what he said. He had fought against the pirates many times and had never encountered anything like what he said. It was just that this person was making excuses. He impatiently waved his hand and said, "Without further ado, cross the river quickly. Don't let that pirate run away." After speaking, he took the lead in riding his horse onto the floating bridge, and his soldiers closely followed suit. The guard could only show a helpless expression upon seeing the situation and beckoned his subordinates to follow. On the other side of the river, the Ming army under Yang Zhiyan had set up an ambush and surrounded Yingzhepo on 3 sides, waiting for the Qing army to fall into the trap. Yang Zhiyan lay low and lurking behind a thicket, with a pair of sharp eagle eyes fixed on the Qing army crossing the river. The Qing army's equipment was not very advanced, and the armor rate was not over half. Most of them were still equipped with large swords and spears, with only a few dozen people holding bird guns. As for the cavalry, it is more appropriate to call them cavalry infantry. They leisurely ride their horses over the floating bridge, but do not rush to make defensive postures. Instead, they casually examine the surrounding environment and occasionally make comments. It's like they're determined that the enemy they're facing right now is really a group of pirates made up of a mob. Li Yulin rode his horse and stepped on the soft riverbank, looking at the abandoned ferry. Most of the people on Yingzhepo were forcibly relocated to the north of Wanzhou County. It is said that he personally supervised the soldiers to drive away the people and set fire to the houses. After waiting for about half a pillar of incense, the Qing army finally crossed the river one after another. Li Yulin couldn't help but smile as he looked at the terrain of the English mansion slope, which was surrounded by water on one side and forests on three sides. The guard beside him saw him laughing for no reason and quickly asked, "Why do guerrillas laugh?" "I laugh at the useless bandits." Li Yulin stroked his goatee and said with a smile, "If the bandits have any suspicious troops set up here, our army's foundation for crossing the river is unstable. If we attack at this time, our army will undoubtedly be defeated. However, the bandits will ultimately be bandits, and small fights and disturbances are not enough to be afraid." After finishing speaking, he waved his hand and said, "The whole army continues to pursue. We must not let any of them run away. This guerrilla will take the head of that ignorant thief and exchange it for tremendous credit at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Li Yulin's words fell, and the 10,000 soldiers under his command didn't have time to rest, so they walked out of the ruins of Ying's Heipo village. However, their front army had just walked out of the village not far away when suddenly they heard a horn sound from all sides. Then, arrows rained down and shot the unsuspecting Qing army green camp to death in large areas. Kill! Kill the Qingyao, don't let anyone run away. Between lightning and fire, countless soldiers rushed out from the three sides of the Yingzhai slope, waving their swords and shields and shouting to kill the Qing army. Li Yulin was shocked by the sudden attack and his face turned pale. He quickly reacted, tightened his reins, raised his sword, and shouted, "Enemy attack! Line up to face the enemy! Line up to face the enemy!" Li Yulin's voice was quickly drowned out in the noise on the battlefield. Wanzhou camp was not particularly elite, and its rare achievements were still drawn from the pirates. At this moment, they were facing three enemies on all sides, and naturally fell into chaos, unable to organize resistance. The Ming army advanced from three sides, with General Lin Renjin leading the troops who were still being chased not long ago, vowing to wash away the shame with the enemy's heads. Yang Zhiyan did not personally participate in the war. He stood calmly at a high place, overlooking the chaotic battlefield, watching the Chinese military camp cut off the retreat of the Qing army under the leadership of a deputy general. As the Qing army turned back in the rear, he fired several rounds of dense volleys with his gun. Amidst the piercing sound of gunshots, the morale of the Qing army quickly declined. Li Yulin held up to the sky, realizing that he had been trapped. He led his own troops to charge left and right, attempting to force a bloody path with his own bravery, but ultimately fell to the roar of the central military camp's bird guns. With the death of Li Yulin in battle, the Qing army was completely defeated without a leader. The Ming army timely shouted the words, "Those who surrender will not die," and for a moment, the entire Qing army on the battlefield threw down their weapons and knelt down together, begging for surrender from the Ming army. Chapter 4. Victory. You are listening at novelfull.audio. General Town, this battle has been a great victory, and our army has effortlessly annihilated over 100 enemies. After the war, Yang Zhiyan nodded slightly as he listened to Vice General Yang Yanqin's report. His gaze was fixed on the busy crowd on the slope of the Yingzhai, where the Qing prisoners were being driven away and placed under centralized supervision. The Ming infantry systematically cleared the battlefield, while the injured sat on stones receiving treatment from accompanying military doctors. Li Yulin, a pseudo-Wanzhou guerrilla, was also killed in the melee. In this battle, our army killed 99 enemy soldiers, including 394 defenders who were captured. Our army only lost 21 brothers and 15 were injured. In addition, 28 bird guns, 30 gunpowder, 48 war horses, and 20 sitting horses were confiscated. The deputy general quickly reported the battle report, and the difference in casualties between the enemy and us was within Yang Zhiyan's acceptable range. The soldiers of Yangwu town under his command also inherited a part of the characteristics of the Jing family in Yanping, which was that as soon as they landed, they would separate from each other. They were not afraid of water warfare, but they had to be cautious in land warfare. Since the casualties on his own side were within his acceptable range, Yang Jian felt relieved. After thinking for a moment, he said, "Let the captured soldiers identify each other, and those who commit crimes, commit adultery, and plunder shall be publicly executed, while the rest shall be placed under centralized custody for disposal after the war." Although there was a lack of sufficient troops in the army, the Qing army had just been captured, and being incorporated into the army like this would still create unstable factors. Therefore, Yang Jian decided to concentrate and detain them first, and then absorb them after taking over Wanzhou city. After speaking, Yang Yanqin was about to leave, but Yang Jian stopped him and said, "Bring the captured guard and interrogate him severely. We must interrogate the intelligence of Wanzhou city defense." Yang Yanqin quickly agreed to pass on the command from the main town, and after completing the cleaning of the battlefield, the soldiers began to burn fires and cook, preparing to replenish the energy lost in the battle by eating. Not long after, the aroma of food permeated Ying's Heipo, and the deputy general walked over with the disheartened Qing army guard covered in blood stains. The captured guard's mouth was not strict, and Yang Jian only threatened a little before revealing everything he knew in detail. In addition to the situation of the Wanzhou garrison that Yang Jian wanted to know, he also revealed the movements of the Wanzhou sailors. Upon learning that Li Yulin had sent warships to search for their ships in advance, attempting to cut off their retreat, Yang Jian almost burst into laughter. He had more than 10 ships of all sizes under his command, and even the pitiful few boats of the Wanzhou sailors wanted to cut off his retreat. Yang Jian pondered for a moment and believed that taking over Wanzhou city was the top priority at the moment. After all, they could only truly have a stable base after taking over Wanzhou County, and the comprehensive war system could officially start. Just as Yang Jian was pondering, Zhang An, the garrison of the Qing army, had completely figured out his own situation. These bandits were clearly the Ming army pretending to be pirates, no matter what kind of pirates they were. Li Yulin disregarded the enemy and advanced recklessly, to the point where Wanzhou camp was almost destroyed. Even if he could escape, he would definitely not avoid punishment. At least his defensive position could not be preserved. Moreover, Zhang An did not believe that this group of Ming soldiers would give up the empty Wanzhou county and not go to fight. They would inevitably be held accountable by the imperial court, both vertically and horizontally. It would be better for him to directly join the Ming army and lead them to take Wanzhou. Perhaps he could even secure some official positions. Thinking of this, Zhang An swallowed his saliva and boldly looked at Yang Jian, saying, "General, I have something to say." His words pulled Yang Jian's thoughts back. Yang Jian looked at his flickering gaze and raised his eyebrows, saying, "Speak up. I am a villain. My ancestors were all from the Ming Dynasty and I have always been loyal to the Wang army. Now that the Wang army is launching a counterattack on Xiongzhou, I am willing to work hard for the general and offer the city of Wanzhou to the Wang army." After Zhang An finished speaking, he knocked heavily on the ground and dared not look up to see Yang Jian's reaction. Yang Jian didn't answer immediately. He exchanged glances with Yang Yanqin, who hesitated for a moment before nodding and shaking his head again. Yang Jian immediately understood the other party's meaning. He stared at Zhang An kneeling on the ground and said, "This town can give you a chance. If you can really help Wang Shi recapture Wanzhou, this town will not only retain your position as a defender, but also give you an additional reward." However, as he changed his tone, he became stern. "If you dare to deceive our town, when Wanzhou city is broken, our town will surely kill all of you, as a warning to others." Zhang An's body trembled, and he quickly kowtowed a few more times, exclaiming that he dared not. His whole family was in Wanzhou city, so how could Wanzhou city possibly withstand the Ming army's attack? If he had any ulterior motives, the day the city was destroyed would be when his whole family died. Yang Jian knew he couldn't persuade this person with just a few words, so he just waved his hand to be taken away, and then turned his gaze to Yang Yanqin. "Third uncle," he said, while the news has not yet returned to Wanzhou, you will personally lead the brothers in the central military camp to change into Qing military uniforms, display Qing military flags, and let Zhang and deceive them into opening the city gate and seizing the county seat. Yang Yanqin is steady in his actions, and with him leading the team, Yang Zhiyan can no longer rest assured. During the period when the original owner was unconscious before his crossing, the former was also responsible for all affairs in the military town. After hearing Yang Zhiyan's command, Yang Yanqin agreed without even thinking about it. In addition, Zhang An is trustworthy but not entirely trustworthy. Third uncle must keep an eye on him to prevent him from making any small moves, Yang Zhiyan added. Yang Yanqin nodded and said, I naturally saved it. After speaking, he said again, General Town, if Zhang An fails to deceive us into opening the city gate, we must also be prepared for a strong attack. Yang Zhiyan nodded slowly, but his face showed a confident expression. Yang Yanqin frowned as he looked at his expression, not knowing what was on his mind, but he didn't say much. After bowing and bowing, he turned around and left. He was well aware of the importance of speed in warfare. After leaving from Yang Zhiyan, he didn't even bother to eat. He immediately ordered his soldiers to remove and replace the armor of the Qing captured soldiers, and crossed the Wanning River with Zhang An and a few captured soldiers, galloping towards Wanzhou. After Yang Yanqin led his troops to leave, Yang Zhiyan ordered people to return to the Dongyao camp to check the situation, and at the same time ordered the remaining soldiers to have a hasty meal before crossing the river with prisoners and spoils of war, chasing the traces of the central military camp towards Wanzhou. Chapter 5. Seizing the City. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Because the Ming army waited for the entire Qing army to cross the river before launching an attack, and no one was able to escape back to the north bank to report to Wanzhou County, it was not until the Ming army disguised as the Qing army swaggered outside Wanzhou city that the defending army knew that Weining had been completely annihilated. In order to prevent any loopholes from being exposed, Yang Yanqin personally led Zhang An and a small number of captured soldiers, leading more than 200 people to the front, and the remaining troops followed far behind, playing the banner of guerrilla warfare in Wanzhou and creating the illusion of a victorious army. When the front army arrived outside the city, the gate of Wanzhou city was tightly closed and there was no action to open it. Yang Yanqin saw this and frowned slightly, looking at the county town standing under the dusk with some concern, worried that the defenders inside the city might learn the news in advance through some means. Zhang An's heart was also a bit anxious. He was worried that if the defending army refused to open the door for him, the Ming army generals next to him would not hesitate to draw their swords and kill him. Faced with Yang Yanqin's malicious gaze, he could only grit his teeth and ride his horse forward, shouting loudly at the 3 or 2 figures on the top of the city. I am guarding Zhang An, and the officers and soldiers have triumphed. If you don't open the door quickly, why is the door tightly closed? After the words fell, a moment later, someone leaned out half of their body to look at him. The person first looked at Zhang An, recognized him, and quickly turned his head to say something to the rogue next to him. Then, they clasped their fists and saluted him, saying, it was Zhang Shoubei who came back so that the guard could know that in order to prevent thieves from entering the city, one supervisor of the county ordered the city gate to be closed, and I opened the gate for the guard immediately. Upon hearing this, Zhang An breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. He didn't just want to be seen through. He pretended to be indifferent and nodded in response, then waited for the city gate to open. At the top of the city, the person who answered the conversation was about to order someone to open the city gate when he saw the left guard strode over. He quickly took a few steps to greet him and saluted, saying, Mr. Liu, Zhang Shoubei is leading the army to victory, and I am preparing to open the door for him. Has Zhang An come back? Liu Shoubei frowned slightly and thought to himself, it hasn't been a day since we've been back and forth. Why did we come back so quickly, but we didn't stop it? He just said, I'll go with you. Have you seen any guerrillas? Shaking his head, he said, only Zhang Shoubei and his subordinates. Liu Shoubei felt a strange feeling in his heart, but didn't say much. After going down the city gate with General Ba, he ordered the guards to open the gate. The city gate, weighing 1,000 pounds, slowly opened, making a creaking and grinding sound. Through the slowly opening crack, Liu Shoubei saw his colleague Zhang Anduan sitting on the back of a horse, with soldiers stained with blood behind him. I don't know if it's an illusion, but he seems to vaguely see some familiar soldiers in front with a hint of fear on their faces. This made Liu Shoubei's strange feeling even stronger in his heart. Zhang and outside the city didn't know anyone had noticed something was wrong. He saw the city gate open, and a hint of joy appeared on his face. Yang Yanqin beside him also made a decisive decision and led his army towards the city gate. As the Ming army approached the city gate closer and closer, Liu Shoubei's strange feeling grew stronger in his heart. It wasn't until the Ming army was less than 20 meters away from the city gate that he finally realized something was wrong. Although it was dusk and the light was dim, he could still see many unfamiliar faces among the soldiers across from him, and their hands were tightly gripping weapons, looking at him as if they were looking at prey. No, close the city gate quickly. Realizing this, Liu Shoubei's entire body was instantly covered in sweat and hair. He widened his eyes and shouted loudly at the still ignorant gatekeeper, leading the charge towards the city gate, attempting to close the half-opened gate again. And his actions also fell into the eyes of the Ming army who was about to enter the city. Although Yang Yanqin was not sure how the other party detected the clues, he reacted quickly and rubbed out his sword, shouting, "Kill, take the door." Everything was in the midst of lightning, fire, and stones. When the guards reacted, the robe outside the city swung its sword and killed them like a fierce tiger descending the mountain. These Qing soldiers were so frightened that their hair stood on end. They quickly followed Liu Shoubei in an attempt to close the city gate. But a distance of 20 meters can be completed in just a few seconds while adults are running at full speed. How could the Ming army give them the opportunity to close the city gate again? In the blink of an eye, they rushed to the city gate and waved their butcher's knife at the Qing soldiers who were trying to close the door. Liu Shoubei was the first to bear the brunt. Before he could draw his sword to face the enemy, he was cut to death by the Ming army rushing towards him, and the other Qing soldiers were also killed. The incident at the city gate left the people still active on the street in a daze. After a moment, they all reacted and screamed as they scattered and fled. Yang Yanqin stepped on a corpse and entered the city. He ignored the screams of the fleeing people on the street and said in a low voice, "Send a signal to the Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and order the remaining troops to enter the city. Be sure to occupy Wanzhou city before it gets completely dark. Obey me." Immediately, the Ming army marched down the street and stormed into the city, causing panic and avoidance among the people. They fled to their homes and tightly closed the doors, blocking them with various furniture, fearing that the chaos would break through. They could only hide in their inner rooms trembling with fear. It's not good. The master is not good. The chaos of war in the streets cannot escape the eyes and ears of the supervisor of the county. In the county government, Wan Lin, the supervisor of the county, was dealing with government affairs, when his staff rushed in a panic and kept shouting. Wan Lin threw his brush at the table in displeasure and said, "Why are you panicking? What's wrong? What happened?" "Master, there was a mutiny." "There was a mutiny." The aide ignored Wan Lin's displeasure. He hurried to the supervisor of the county and said, "The garrison Zhang and led his men to mutiny. They killed Liu Shoubei and are coming towards the county government." "What?" Wan Lin's body trembled and his face turned pale in an instant. He repeatedly said, "It's impossible. Didn't Zhang go with Li Yulin to suppress the bandits? What nonsense." The staff member was so worried that he was sweating heavily, and he did not care about the order of hierarchy. He walked around the table and came to the supervisor of the county. He directly reached out and pulled his sleeve, saying, "Master, it's too late. Let's go quickly. If we don't go, it's too late." As he spoke, he pulled Wan Lin out and ran. Although Wan Lin couldn't believe it in his heart, he was still dragged out by his staff and stumbled. They quickly walked out of the county government office. Just as they stepped down the stairs, Wan Lin saw a chaotic army killing at the corner of the street. Who was the person on horseback, led by Zhang An? Seeing this scene, Wan Lin's heart sank completely. It's over now, the Wanzhou mutiny. Even if he could escape, he would be nailed to death on the pillar of shame. Chapter 6. Occupation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wan Lin is there, don't let Wan Lin go. Wan Lin recognized Zhang An, and Zhang An naturally recognized Wan Lin. What's more, Wan Lin was wearing official clothes at this time, which was very conspicuous. Zhang An directly raised his knife and pointed at several people in the supervisor of the county who were trying to escape, shouting at the Ming army soldiers around him. After his words fell, the Ming army soldiers rushed towards Wan Lin and others like wolves and tigers. Zhang An took the lead and rode his horse and wielded his sword to charge. Although he successfully deceived the Ming army into opening the city gate, for the sake of safety, he still used Wan Lin's head as his pledge to solidify his position in the Ming army. Wan Lin was so scared when he saw Zhang An rushing towards him, that his hair stood on end. He quickly commanded the Yamen guard next to him to block the pursuers, while he hurriedly climbed onto the fast horse with the help of his staff, trying to run one step ahead. However, the Yamen runner is good at imposing on the people in ordinary days. Facing the ferocious soldiers, they are useless. They can't ignore the orders of the supervisor of the county and shout to flee in all directions. The staff are preparing to follow them on the horse. Seeing this, they also directly mixed in the Yamen runner and fled towards the surrounding alleys. Zhang An ignored the fleeing people and rode his warhorse a few steps before catching up with Wan Lin. He reached out and grabbed Wan Lin's neck collar from behind. With another forceful lift, he pulled Wan Lin off his horse and threw him to the ground. As a scholar, Wan Lin couldn't withstand this fall. He let out a scream and immediately passed out. Before Zhang An could turn over and dismount, soldiers took the initiative to control Wan Lin, who had fainted. The others rushed into the county government office and took over the warehouse and important documents in the county office as soon as possible. Kill. At the same time, the Ming army that entered the city also engaged in battles with some of the defenders who finally reacted. Although the Ming army that entered the city first only had over 200 people, their opponents were also left behind sailors and militiamen who were not skilled in infantry. The number of defenders was slightly better, but their forces were scattered and their fighting spirit was not high. The Ming army, on the other hand, was full of fighting spirit under the leadership of Yang Yanqin. Each of them knew that this battle was crucial and directly related to whether they could establish a foothold in Qingzhou. If they won, they would have a stable base, but if they were defeated, they would have to flee back to the sea in embarrassment. As soon as they thought of the days when they drifted on the sea in the past, the soldiers of the Ming army couldn't help but unite and fight against the Qing army on the opposite side, holding back their anger. Instead, they defeated the defending army, which had an advantage in numbers, step by step. Outside the city, the Ming army, originally carrying the banner of Wanzhou guerrilla, saw the signal to enter the city and, according to the original plan, replaced it with the Ming army flag. They marched into the city and joined forces with friendly forces to join the battle. The new Ming army joined the war, and the military gap between the two sides was quickly narrowed or even surpassed. Under the strong attack of the Chinese military camp, the defending army was quickly defeated and could no longer organize effective resistance. The Ming army immediately began to bring Wanzhou city under control, and at the same time, the appearance of the Ming army's banner made the people and gentry in the city finally understand what had happened. It turned out that it was not an internal conflict between the Qing army, but that the Ming army had killed them, which made them even more frightened. Although the killing of the Ming army in Qingzhou was not as great as that of the Qing army, the fear of the chaotic army was deeply buried in everyone's bones. Moreover, if the Qing royal army were to fight back, the cities would change hands, and the Qing army would plunder the local people. Anyway, it was they who suffered. Amidst the atmosphere of fear, the Ming army unexpectedly did not plunder the residents of the city. As mentioned earlier, Yang Yanqin knew that Wanzhou city would become the base of Yangwu town in the future and could not lose the hearts of the people. Therefore, he ordered his subordinates to discipline the military and kill anyone who committed adultery or crime. Under Yang Yanqin's strict military order, although there were sporadic old-timers who refused to obey the military discipline and harassed the people, they were quickly killed on the spot. The military discipline of the Ming army was one of the most important things. Until the garrison was defeated and Wanzhou city was occupied, the Ming army did not harass the people. At night, Yang Jiyan finally led his main force to reach Wanzhou. At this time, Wanzhou had already been taken by the Ming army. Yang Yanqin led a group of officers from the central military camp to greet them at the city gate, each with a smile on their faces. The days of drifting and seeking refuge at sea had finally come to an end. Yang Jiyan faced the joy of the officers, but his heart was not relaxed. Wanzhou was just the beginning, and in order to completely settle down, the entire Qiongzhou must be under his control. Otherwise, the Qing army would continue to harass and try to prevent their resumption of production. After Yang Jiyan captured Wanzhou, there was not much time, and at most 1 or 2 months, the Qing army would counterattack and attempt to recapture Wanzhou city. Thinking of this, Yang Jiyan said seriously to them, "Now is not a happy time. The Qing thieves will not give us a chance to breathe. When our families arrive tomorrow, we will start conscription, training, and preparation for war." After listening to the words of the general, the officers' expressions of joy also restrained. Yang Yanqin was the first to express his opinion. What the general town said is true. Wanzhou is just a small town on one side of the border. Even if you take it, you cannot be arrogant or complacent. The officers all nodded and said, "Let's all enter the city. The soldiers have been fighting all day and it's tiring. Arrange the necessary patrol team to be on duty at night, and the rest of us can rest. We'll discuss anything tomorrow." In addition, he ordered people to quickly return to Dongyao and ordered Chen Anxin to lead his army to Wanzhou to join forces. After speaking, his gaze swept over Zhang'an, who was standing among the officers. The latter's face had a hint of nervousness, and Yang Jiyan ignored him. Instead, he looked at Yang Yanqin and said, "Vice General Yang, come with me." Yang Yanqin was immediately ordered to follow Yang Jiyan, who was riding on horseback, into the city. Behind them, General Lin Renjin took over the military power and shouted loudly, "Enter the city." As the words fell, the army slowly entered the city. Zhang'an, who was in the crowd, looked at Yang Jiyan's back and couldn't help feeling uneasy. He couldn't grasp the attitude of the Ming army commander towards him, but he didn't dare to act rashly. He could only suppress his emotions and wait for tomorrow's arrival. On the way to the county government office, Yang Yanqin also took the initiative to report on Yang Jiyan's measures after occupying Wanzhou city. After entering the city, he not only restrained military discipline, but also organized patrol teams to patrol the streets and alleys, arrest those thugs who tried to take advantage of the chaos and fish, and let the small officials in the county government office go to the streets to appease the people and stabilize their hearts. "Well done," Yang Jiyan praised, which was also the reason why he chose Yang Yanqin as the vanguard to attack the city. Compared to the other 2 generals, his abilities were more outstanding. Yang Yanqin only smiled slightly at his nephew's praise, and then reported on the losses during the capture of the city. Most of the soldiers in the central military camp were skilled veterans with much higher combat effectiveness than the defenders. As a result, they suffered more than 10 casualties and defeated the defenders, taking the county town. The casualties here are within Yang Jiyan's acceptable range. He asked Yang Yanqin to record the names of the war victims and provide compensation after their families arrive. Chapter 7. System Activation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Detect the host's capture of Wanzhou City and now activate the Empire Total War system. After seeing off Yang Yanqin at the Wanzhou County government, Yang Jian sat alone in his study, quietly waiting for the system to start. To check the current data for you. Camp Leader. Yang Jian age. 22 Land Command Capability. Naval Battle Command Capability. Attributes. Brave Sailors, Naval Command Effect +1, Wartime Morale +1, Excellent Naval Generals, Naval Command Effect +2, Advanced Generals, Land Command Effect +2, Fearless in Times of Danger, Wartime Morale +1, Attendant. Favorite Military Horse, Command Effect +1 when commanding cavalry units, National Treasury. 2105 Novice Gift Pack. 1. Having looked at his personal attribute panel, Yang Jian was momentarily stunned. It was the first time he had seen that both Army and Navy command capabilities could coexist. However, after a moment of thought, he quickly clarified his mind. Which of the generals of the Mingzheng faction was not someone who wanted to command naval warfare or land warfare? They needed to know both, and the system should have taken this into consideration. Yang Jian didn't dwell on the attribute panel for too long. Later, he turned his attention to the beginner gift package column. Having read extensively and read many travel texts, he became self-taught and tried to open the beginner gift package with his mind. The beginner gift pack has been opened. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 10,000 taels of silver, 200 warhorses, 1,000 dog-lock flint guns, 500 rounds of ammunition, 1 firearms workshop, cavalry, 60, x1, infantry, 120, x2, note. The Army template cannot be directly summoned and needs to be used through recruitment training. Recruiting troops will consume weapons and equipment, and without equipment, recruitment cannot proceed. Upon seeing the troops brought out by the newbie gift package, Yang Jian couldn't help but smile on his face. However, upon seeing the prompt behind him, his expression immediately collapsed. He thought he could summon them directly and then occupy Cheongzhou Prefecture in a short period of time during the northern expedition, but it can only be said to be hasty. However, Yang Jian was not discouraged by this. The combat effectiveness and morale of the troops rewarded by this system are not comparable to those of the soldiers in Yangwu town. If he could apply the template to the soldiers in Yangwu town, the combat effectiveness of his subordinates would double. With the system soldiers as the core and the original soldiers of Yangwu town, in this small Cheongzhou town, as long as it is not surrounded by thousands of Qing troops at the same time, he can walk horizontally. In addition to the military, he also noticed another highlight, which is the firearms workshop. If I remember correctly, this firearms workshop should not be available in the Imperial War game. Combined with the following prompts, Yang Jian couldn't help but feel that this system is really considerate. He was afraid that he didn't have a stable source of weapons, so he gave him a workshop at the beginning. Just as Yang Jian was pondering in his heart, the sound of the system rang out again in his ear. Firearms workshops can produce standard firearms such as dog-lock flint guns for hosts and make infantry recruitment cheaper. First-level firearms workshops produce 100 firearms per month, second-level firearms manufacturing factories produce 300 firearms per month, and third-level light weapons manufacturing factories produce 1,000 firearms per month, while improving the quality and manufacturing costs of firearms can level 1 produce 100 firearms per month. Yang Jian touched his stubble chin, and now that he was already in his twilight years, he had grown short whiskers on his chin and upper lip to make himself look more majestic. The production capacity of 100 firearms per month is not very high, but in this era, it is already considered very excellent. After all, it is only a small workshop, not the scale of the firearms department of the Imperial Ministry of Works. Overall, Yang Jian is very satisfied with the rewards offered in the beginner gift package. Closing the beginner gift package, Yang Jian turned to the city panel to check the specific situation of this Wanzhou city. Cheongzhou Prefecture. Wanzhou, capital, population. 3158 recruitable dinko. 300 public security. 75%, good, tax. 15% income. 816 buildings already owned. County government, township Yongying, paved stone road, liquor shop, Wanzhou school, and Shuizhai, occupied by enemy, buildings that can be built. Military barracks, artillery foundries, firearms workshops, free of charge, recruitable units. Militia, spearmers, line infantry X2, cavalry X1, note. According to the Wanning County Annals, the population of Wanzhou in 1662 was only 2,858 people, which can only be said to be the most difficult for the people during the Ming and Qing dynasties. Seeing that the population was only over 3,000, Yang Zhiyan couldn't help but feel a thump in his heart. The plan to recruit and expand troops in Wanzhou County seemed to have gone bankrupt, but even if all the troops were depleted, he couldn't gather a battalion. What is the conversion time for building and recruiting troops in the system? Yang Zhiyan realized a question and asked the system with his consciousness. Convert real time to 1 month in 1 round. As the system spoke, Yang Zhiyan's eyebrows furrowed again. The construction of the military barracks and artillery foundry in the building, as well as the recruitment of militia and spearmen in the army, could be completed in a month. However, although the firearms workshop was a reward for beginners, it still needed to be manually built before it could be put into use. The firearm workshop will take 4 months to complete. If Yang Zhiyan were to act faster, he might have already taken over the Cheongzhou prefecture before the firearm workshop could be completed. Zhaosuiyuan.com. After only a moment of contemplation, Yang Zhiyan had an idea that the army barracks and artillery foundry could be built simultaneously. He spent 1,500 taels of silver to build these 2 buildings together. Army barracks can unlock the recruitment of linear infantry, which is the backbone of the army. However, considering gun restrictions, even if linear infantry is unlocked, it cannot be recruited on a large scale. At present, if we want to recruit troops, we still mainly rely on spearmen without weapon restrictions. After the construction of the artillery foundry is completed, falcon guns and semi-cannons can be unlocked. The Yangwu town army lacks heavy firepower, and the only thing that can be said is the 5 Folong machine guns and several Tiger squatting guns equipped on the boat. When it comes to this, it is necessary to mention the boats and ships under the jurisdiction of Yangwu town. There are a total of 28 boats and ships in Yangwu town, including 3 gunboats, 5 bird boats, and 5 chasing boats each. The remaining 15 ships carry soldiers, family members, and supplies and are not used in naval warfare. In addition to investing 2 buildings in construction, Yang Zhiyan decided to recruit 2 additional teams of spearmen. The recruited personnel here will be selected from the captured Qing army. On the one hand, they have certain combat experience and will be more reliable than the new recruits recruited from the common people. On the other hand, the troops recruited through the system will ensure loyalty to him. Although Yang Zhiyan is not worried that those Qing captured soldiers will rebel against him, why not reduce hidden dangers in this way? In addition to the 2 captain spearmen, Yang Zhiyan is also preparing to select 240 people from the Chinese military camp to take over the training of the line infantry template. After training, their loyalty to Yang Zhiyan and various combat indicators including accuracy, loading skills, and melee attacks will be greatly improved. Yang Zhiyan's idea is to completely transform the central military camp into his own elite and become the main combat force of Yangwu town. Chapter 8. Night Talk. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Closing the system panel, Yang Zhiyan rubbed his neck, which was slightly sore from being low for a long time, and then narrowed his eyes slightly, beginning to think about the next direction of development. Wanzhou is located on the southeast coast of Cheongzhou, with unique natural conditions such as mountains, rivers, fields, and forests. Before the relocation and prohibition of the sea, most of the population concentrated in the coastal plain areas downstream of the Wannan River, Longzhou River, and Longgu River. The water conservancy in this area is the best in Cheongzhou, with fertile soil that is most suitable for agricultural production. After the Ming army recaptured Wanzhou, the first thing to do was to restore agriculture and reclaim the abandoned fields due to the ban on the sea. Agricultural production is of utmost importance. When Yangwu town was still at sea, it suffered from the problem of food shortage. After the soldiers and their families arrived at Wanzhou city, he had to allocate land for them, both to restore production and to strengthen their determination to defend Wanzhou. Not only agriculture, but also the fishing industry should be restored. Due to the relocation and ban on the sea, the fishing industry in Qingzhou is almost abandoned, and fishermen are forced to switch careers and abandon their fishing gear and vessels. Now that the Ming army has landed, there is no need to continue the ban on the sea. He is prepared to wait until tomorrow to announce the opening of the ban, allowing fishermen to return to the sea to make a living by fishing. Just as Yang Jian was pondering in his heart, a series of footsteps sounded outside. He opened his eyes and saw that Yang Yanxin had returned. Just now, Yang Jian asked him to be responsible for counting the warehouse. He thought he would need some time to come back, but he didn't expect to come back so soon. He held a stack of account books in his hand, and the expression on his face made it difficult to tell whether he was happy or worried. After Yang Yanxin entered, he directly opened the door to the mountain path and said, "General Town, these are the warehouse account books that the scribe has recalculated. Please take a look." Yang Jian took over the account book and briefly flipped through it. The amount of various materials registered in the account book was slightly less than he had imagined. In addition to money, grain, and silver, the materials stored in the warehouse are also some common items such as cloth, fur, and jade. Among them, there are only over 500 taels of silver, 1,000 stones of grain, most of which are aged grains, and the rest of the supplies are also very scarce. Turning his gaze back, Yang Jian frowned and looked at Yang Yanxin, saying, "Why is there so little inventory in the warehouse?" Yang Yanxin said with a wry smile. The last general also asked the local petty officials and supervisor of the county's staff that Wanzhou was originally a poor county, with insufficient population, a large number of fugitives, and no taxes. After listening to his words, Yang Jian didn't know what to say for a moment. He helplessly supported his forehead and said, "Do you have someone to inspect the warehouse of the village's brave camp?" "I have already ordered someone to go and count." Shortly after Yang Yanxin's words fell, someone from outside entered and reported the inventory results of the Xiangyong camp warehouse to the two of them. Although the Yungying camp in that township is the base of Wanzhou camp, there are not many military weapons, including sleeveless cotton armor, 50 sets of cloth armor, a total of more than 150 waist knives and long spears, more than 50 bird guns, and no gunpowder. Upon hearing this, Yang Jian and his companions couldn't help but glance at each other, both seeing a hint of dissatisfaction on each other's faces. It seemed that the idea of expanding the reserve of resources by taking over Wanzhou city had gone bankrupt. Looking at this impoverished Qingzhou, it was feared that only the Fuqing had a significant reserve of resources. Yang Jian waved his hand, gesturing for the person to step back, and then turned his gaze back to Yang Yanxin, saying, "Relying solely on 1,000 stones of grain in the warehouse is not enough to solve our army's current shortage of food. Uncle, do you have any ideas?" Yang Yanxin pondered slightly and said, "To be honest, I do have an immature idea at the end, but it can only solve the urgent problem and may affect future development." Upon hearing his hesitant tone, Yang Jian furrowed his brow and realized something. He smiled and said, "Uncle San, don't worry too much. Let's write it down separately on paper first, and then take it out together to see if you, my uncle, and nephew have thought of going together." Yang Yanxin did not object to his proposal, so Yang Jian tore open a roll of rice paper on the table and gave him half. The two of them picked up a brush, dipped it in ink, looked at each other, and each wrote on the rice paper. After a moment, the two of them stopped together, and Yang Yanxin didn't have any hidden thoughts. He boldly displayed the words he had written, only to see the two characters, gentry, prominently written on it. Yang Zhiyan then separated his rice paper, and although the handwriting of the two was different, they were the same two characters. Yang Yanqin was somewhat surprised when he saw this, and Yang Zhi said with a smile, "Third uncle, it seems that you, my uncle, and nephew really have a deep understanding. That gentry has been occupying the countryside for generations, exploiting the people, oppressing the good, and colluding with the bandits. My great Ming Wang Shi has recaptured Wanzhou, and naturally wants to uphold justice for the people and bring peace to the world. Although this can solve temporary difficulties, if the news spreads, I'm afraid that local gentry will regard us as fierce beasts and spare no effort to resist Wang Shi together with the Qing bandits." Yang Yanqin said with some concern, which also made him hesitate. Upon hearing his concerns, Yang Zhiyan smiled and said, "Third uncle, your ideas are a bit of a choker. If we were to look at your concerns, we shouldn't have landed in Qiongzhou and recaptured this city of Wanzhou from the beginning." As he spoke later, his smile on zhaoshuyuan.com became serious and he said, "How can we not act because we are worried about resistance in the future? Even if we don't take action against the local gentry, when the Qing bandits come to kill us, they may collude with them inside and outside to attack us. After all, when the Ming dynasty retreats to Dongning, they already consider the Qing dynasty as orthodox." Yang Zhiyan also understood in his heart that the reason why Yang Yanqin hesitated so much was also due to the fact that the Yang family used to belong to the gentry group. He was inherently inclined towards tradition, which was also his limitation. Yang Zhiyan could only follow and guide. Upon hearing Yang Zhiyan's words, Yang Yanqin couldn't help but feel ashamed and lowered his head. This was the first time he had been taught by his nephew like this, but he also knew that he was too far-sighted and didn't have any dissatisfaction with Yang Zhiyan. Watching his reaction, Yang Zhiyan's tone softened and he comforted, saying, "Third uncle is also thinking about the future of Yangwu town. It is precisely because of third uncle's best assistance that Yangwu town was able to break through the encirclement and come here. What my nephew wants to say is that anti-Qing is not about treating guests to meals. The necessary firmness is inevitable, and the enemy will not lean towards us because of our tenderness. The only thing we can do is to distinguish the objects that can be won over and strike those stubborn elements who cannot be won over like thunder." Boom! Yang Zhiyan's words seemed to explode in Yang Yanqin's ear, deafening him. Yang Yanqin suddenly looked up at his nephew, his eyes stained with tears at some point, and his face was filled with excitement. "Mingqi, Yang Zhiyan's handwriting." He reached out and grabbed Yang Zhiyan's shoulder, excitedly saying, "You have grown up. Yangwu town can have a general leader like you, why worry about not being able to succeed? If your father had a spirit in heaven, he would also be proud of you." Chapter 9. Gentry Seeking an Audience. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the end, Yang Yanqin was convinced and agreed to take action against the landlords and gentry in Wanzhou. The matter of taking action against the gentry will be personally handled by Yang Zhiyan. His idea is to collect some criminal records of local illegal gentry from the public, use them as evidence to accuse them, and publicly trial them. This can not only appease the people's hearts, but also earn a good reputation, which is a win-win situation. Of course, local gentry cannot be completely eradicated. Some of the best reputations can be left behind. If they were all slaughtered at once, they would truly become enemies of the landlord gentry in the future. How did Li Zicheng fall in the past? One of the reasons for not being able to stand firm at the grassroots level without the support of the landlord gentry is that, otherwise, after a disastrous defeat, the Shun dynasty would not have collapsed, and even Li Zicheng himself would have been killed by the landlord team. Yang Zhiyan does not want to repeat Li Zicheng's mistakes. Of course, with the help of the system, he does not believe that he will be forced to that extent. If he really reaches that level, he might as well commit suicide, becoming the most useless interloper in history. The next morning, some people opened their doors and carefully looked outside. They found that the street had been washed away, and the bodies and splattered blood from the fighting had disappeared. Only the fully armed Ming army officers and soldiers who occasionally passed by were on the street. With the comforting words of yesterday's defection to the petty officials, coupled with the fact that these Ming army officers and soldiers did not offend them overnight, and even helped to arrest those local ruffians who were trying to fish in troubled waters, the people's courage increased and they dared to go out of their homes and try to talk to the patrolling officers and soldiers on the street. However, most of the Ming army officers and soldiers in Yangwu town came from the southern Fujian region, with a small number coming from the eastern coast of Guangdong. The dialects they spoke were completely different from those of the people of Cheongzhou, and the conversation between the two sides could be described as a chicken sharing a duck. Although the conversation between the two sides was not smooth, the friendly attitude of the Ming army officers and soldiers can be clearly seen, which makes the people feel much more at ease. So, more and more people took to the streets, starting their daily work, and the gentry living in the city spontaneously gathered to discuss how to deal with the new owner of Wanzhou City. Anyway, it is a fact that Wanzhou City fell into the hands of the Ming army. No matter how much they miss the Qing court or are worried about the Qing court's return and liquidation, it is a matter of the future. The top priority now is to protect the lives of these Ming soldiers. Simply licking them will only make their entire family die faster. Even if you don't like them much, you have to show off openly. Just as the gentry gathered to discuss, Yang Jian also got up early. As soon as he woke up, he ordered Lin Renjin to lead 300 soldiers out of the city and head towards the water fortress that was still under the control of the Qing army. Yesterday, the soldiers were both fighting and rushing, and everyone was exhausted. Therefore, they had to wait until today to take action. Only by seizing the water fortress will the system open up the right to recruit warships. In the future, if they want to intercept the Qing court reinforcements coming from the north across the sea, they may have to rely on the western warships produced by the system. The new actions of the Ming army did not escape the ears and eyes of the gentry. When they learned that the Ming army had been mobilized again, they couldn't sit still for a moment, afraid that the Ming army's mobilization would be targeted at them. Therefore, they were hesitant to discuss any comprehensive solutions and gathered around the elected representatives to go to the county government to meet. At this time, Yang Jian was discussing with Yang Yanxin in the study the specific content of the agricultural policy to be issued next. Yang Jian's idea was to encourage the people to cultivate land, and all cultivated land would be tax-free for 3 years. Agricultural tools and oxen could be borrowed from the government. The borrowing here is definitely not free. The people can use a portion of the harvest from the first year after cultivating the land as collateral. This is not that Yang Jian is in a hurry to harvest, but compared to free borrowing, paid ones will be more carefully taken care of by the people. Yang Yanxin has no objection to his idea, but he thinks that both of them are not professional civil servants, so we should first deal with Wan Lin, the supervisor of the county who is currently being detained, to see whether he can win over. If Wan Lin is willing to work for them, the implementation of the new policy can be more smooth. During their discussion, someone came in to report that the gentry was seeking an audience. The two of them looked at each other, and Yang Jian put down his brush and smiled, saying, "It seems that these gentry cannot resist loneliness. They took the initiative to seek an audience so quickly. Uncle San, will you come with me to meet them?" After thinking for a moment, Yang Yanxin nodded and said, "Sure, we also need someone to sing red-faced when facing those gentry." Yang Jian didn't expect this level. Since Yang Yanxin took the initiative to bring it up, he tacitly agreed. Later, Yang Jian ordered someone to release the gentry, and he and Yang Yanxin moved to the front hall to meet. When the two of them arrived at the front hall from the study, the gentry had already been brought in. They stood in the front hall chattering and chatting. The soldiers guarding the side door saw them coming and quickly saluted, shouting, "Here we are, General Town." The soldiers' words fell, and the voices inside all fell silent. Everyone's gaze focused on Yang Jian, who was the first to step in. The local gentry knew very little about this sudden group of Ming soldiers, and Yang Jian's youth was beyond their expectations. Although Yang Jiyan, like most fishermen who have lived by the sea for a long time, his skin has become dark and rough due to being constantly ravaged by the sea breeze, it has not affected his appearance, but rather added a touch of maturity and stability to his young face. After seeing him, the gentry were only stunned for less than a second, and then all reacted. Led by the leader, they all bowed to Yang Jiyan, saying, "We will see General." After speaking, everyone began to introduce themselves from the representative. After everyone introduced themselves, the representative continued, "General, please accept us amidst your busy schedule. If you have any trouble, please forgive me, General." Yang Jiyan nodded slightly, took a few steps to the main seat, sat down casually, and found the Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Yang Yenxin stood beside him, his eagle eyes scanning these various scheming gentry, as if he wanted to see them through. Being scrutinized by Yang Yenxin like this, even the oldest and most prestigious representative couldn't help feeling anxious. Seeing that Yang Jiyan had not made a statement, he continued with a dry smile. After the general led his army into the city, he restrained his subordinates and made no mistakes. He also used a small rope for a long time, which is actually a teacher of benevolence and righteousness. Moreover, since the Qing army entered Cheongzhou, they have levied exorbitant taxes on the people of Cheongzhou, resulting in many fleeing soldiers. The people have long been hoping for Wang Shi. Now that Wang Shi has returned, in order to show the sincerity of the local gentry and laborers, they are willing to send 1,000 taels of silver, 20 zhang of cloth, 50 goats and pigs each, 100 chickens and ducks each, 500 stones of grain, and 30 jars of fine wine. After the representative's words fell, Yang Jiyan finally had a reaction, with a hint of smile on his face. He said, "We have accepted your wishes, and we understand that your previous commitment to the Qing Dynasty was a forced and helpless act. As long as you do not violate the law, we will not hold you accountable." As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yenxin took over the conversation and said coldly, "Don't think this is the gold medal for avoiding death. If I find out that someone is doing that kind of thing, even if the general manager forgives you, I won't spare you." Yang Yenxin's words shook the bodies of the gentry, and several of them couldn't help but look up at him with a guilty conscience, pondering his identity and the purpose behind his words at this moment. Yang Jiyan caught a glimpse of the reactions of these gentry, paying special attention to those who showed a guilty expression. His mouth was filled with a reproachful reprimand, "Vice General Yang, they are all loyal and righteous people who miss their homeland. How could they be so rude?" After speaking, he looked apologetically at the gentry and said, "You all laughed at me. However, Vice General Yang has always been jealous of evil, and it is reasonable for him to say such words. I hope you can understand." Chapter 10. Worries. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Although Yang Jiyan had an apologetic tone in his tone, the gentry were not foolish either. How could they not tell the true meaning in his words? So the gentry dared not respond and instead praised Yang Yenxin's character. They patted their chests and told Yang Jiyan that they would definitely abide by laws and regulations. They also said things like, "The pure self clears," and, "The upright body does not fear the crooked shadow." The air in the front hall seemed to be filled with justice. However, the gentry at least received a guarantee from Yang Jiyan not to pursue their defection to the Qing court. Each of them breathed a sigh of relief, and only a few with ghosts in their hearts still held their breath, thinking that they must wipe their buttocks clean after returning. After discussing this topic for the time being, the representative of the gentry pondered for a moment and then tentatively said, "General, although the Qing court did not deploy heavy troops to guard Cheongzhou, its military strength should not be underestimated. Relying solely on the general's military strength may be difficult to deal with. I wonder if the Crown Prince of Yanping will send more troops to Cheongzhou. This is nature." Yang Jiyan looked calm and did not shy away from his question. "Our town has moved to Wanzhou, and there is naturally the support of the Crown Prince behind it. In the future, more reinforcements will arrive in Cheongzhou. You don't need to worry about the resurgence of the Qing bandits. Perhaps it was due to Yang Jian's calm expression, or perhaps his words were full of confidence that made it difficult to determine how true or false they were. After all, the gentry believed most of it in their hearts. After all, from the demeanor of these Ming soldiers, they didn't feel like they were running away after a fight, but were really preparing to recapture Cheongzhou. Otherwise, how could the Ming army be so polite to the gentry who had no resistance left? A few of them listened and secretly recorded this intelligence, thinking about how to report it to the Qing army. After obtaining the guarantees and some intelligence they wanted, the gentry did not continue to stay in the county government and bid farewell to Yang Jian one after another. After they walked out of the county government office, Yang Jian's smile disappeared instantly. He looked at the deputy general expressionlessly and said, "There are quite a few of these gentry who have problems." After you just finished speaking, a few of them changed their faces. I have recorded their appearance and names, and you will order people to pay more attention later. Immediately, he spoke out the names of those people, and Yang Yanqin quickly memorized them to himself. After Yang Jian finished speaking, he pondered for a moment and said, "Except for these few people, everyone else should also keep an eye on them. There will definitely be someone trying to pass on the information I just revealed to the Qing thief and try to catch both the stolen and the stolen." Yang Yanqin was aware of the importance of this matter, and his face became serious. He nodded and agreed. Then, he thought of something and said inexplicably, "Mingqi, why did you just lie that reinforcements would come? If reinforcements don't come after a while, wouldn't those words be self-destructive? If I don't say those words, how can I control them?" Yang Yanqin nodded slightly and said, "Now that we are not firmly established, we still need to stabilize them first. After a period of time, even if they discover it, we will have control of the situation, and the problematic gentry will be eliminated. What can the rest do?" Yang Yanqin suddenly realized, but he thought of another question and said with a somewhat worried tone, "Those gentry are not a big concern. What I'm worried about is that the news of our army's capture of Wanzhou will return to Cheongzhou Prefecture, and the Qing Dynasty will send a large army to encircle and suppress it. Relying solely on the troops of Yangwu town, it may be difficult to support them alone. This is indeed worth worrying about." Yang Jian nodded, and his face showed a hint of solemnity. Even with the assistance of the system, he could not complete the explosive weapon in the short term. The main issue is that the population of Wanzhou is too small, with only 300 available recruits. Even in the previous generations of total war, this would have been very explosive. "Mingqi, should we contact Erlang and ask him to lead troops to assist?" After thinking for a moment, Yang Yanqin suddenly asked. "Second uncle." Yang Jian was stunned for a moment, and then a figure appeared in his mind. Uncle Yang Yendi. Yang Yendi, like his father, was originally a general under the national surname Yi, but he did not run away with his father, but fought alone. He led his troops to occupy the Jiangshan Peninsula along the coast of Guangxi in the 15th year of the Yongli reign, active in the areas of Qinzhou and Fangcheng County, claiming to be the king of Yang. Later, he was appointed as the commander-in-chief of Liwu town by Xingjing. However, 2 years later, in the 17th year of the Yongli reign, Prince Pingnan Shangkeshi led his troops to conquer. Yang Yendi was defeated multiple times and had to retreat to the Longmen Sea to mediate with the Qing army. Although Yang Yendi fought against the Qing army multiple times in history, he suffered repeated defeats and ultimately saw no hope of restoring his Ming dynasty. He led his army south to flee to Annam and was sheltered by the Nguyen lords of Annam. He was placed in the areas of Dingxiang and Jiating, where he established villages and cities. However, he ultimately died from the betrayal of his subordinates. Yang Jian has a complex attitude towards this second uncle who claims to be King Yang. Yang Yendi also holds military power. If he comes to Cheongzhou, there will definitely be differences in power distribution between himself and Yang Yendi. Yang Yendi, who is full of ambition, will definitely not agree to prioritize himself, and he will not tolerate unstable factors affecting his northern expedition. Moreover, he holds the system in his own hands. If someone else takes away the initiative, it would be a laughingstock. The two generals who held military power had disagreements with each other, and those who did not mediate sought help from Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. The best outcome was to go their separate ways and fight on their own, and the worst outcome. The lessons from the Jing family's civil war after Jing Zhilong's defection to the Qing Dynasty can still be found there. However, although it is not possible to unite, it is still possible for Yang Yendi to provide assistance for the sake of his nephew's face. Yang Jiyan quickly sorted out his thoughts and said, "I will personally write a letter ordering someone to be sent to Longmen-si, asking Uncle Heir to feign an attack on Cheongzhou Prefecture to restrain the Qing army's forces. The essential route from Longmen-si to here will be blocked by the Qing army, and that's all I can do." Yang Yenxin had no objection upon hearing this. He agreed with Yang Jiyan's statement and then took his leave, preparing to complete the task that Yang Jiyan had just instructed. Before leaving, he also reminded Yang Jiyan to remember to deal with Wan Lin, who was still imprisoned. After Yang Yenxin left, Yang Jiyan let out a long sigh. The last thing he wanted to see was infighting. Today, when he suddenly mentioned Yang Yendi, it was difficult for him not to associate it with the lessons of the Jing family, especially since he was already an ambitious person. Moreover, his most trusted deputy is still Yang Yendi's younger brother. If there were any conflicts in the future, what decision would Yang Yenxin make? As soon as Yang Jiyan thought about what might happen in the future, he felt a sudden pain in his temples. He only wanted to wholeheartedly seek revenge, but did not expect to face the same operation that caused blood pressure to soar in the history of the Southern Ming dynasty. Fortunately, those things still haven't happened yet and may not happen. He has enough time to think about how to be prepared and face them. Yang Jiyan sighed again, forced himself to leave those troublesome thoughts behind, ordered people to fetch paper, pen and ink from the study, and prepared to send a letter to Liwu town in person according to the statement just made. While not forgetting Yang Yenxin's instructions, he asked people to bring Wan Lin, the former supervisor of the county, to the prison for questioning.